know we're at the last hour, and this has been so awesome. Hang in. So as she was saying, I'm Jennifer DRC, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm from Butte, born and raised in Butte, and the other Jen.
I'm Jen Wilborg. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work statewide with youth and adolescents with mental illness and also adults across the state. So, we're going to talk about our favorite topic of the day, grief and trauma. We may have it right now just from experiencing some of the conversations today. Jen and I, over the years, have gotten the opportunity to both go to grad school and work together, so this is one of our favorite topics.
I would just add that definitely it's a passion, and trauma and grief work it's tough work. It's been really hard after 2 years in the pandemic. Lots of traumas have emerged just by virtue of where we've been. So, our first slide.
So if you notice, we have a panda down in the hole with a tiny dragon. And one of the things that trauma and grief expect and need from us is a witness and somebody that's willing to sit through it with us and hear the story or land in the story. And one of the things that I think all of us have experienced over the last couple of years is a collective experience of trauma and a collective experience of grief and things that we have lost. And so the reason why we put the two topics together is because they often land together. So a lot of people try to separate the two into two separate entities, but when there has been a traumatic event, we often do something along with it. Well, that's why.
So why trauma and grief? If you could see what each other looks like from the inside, it would be such a different lens. I would like to have you guys, when you get time, in your free time, watch this movie called The Wisdom of Trauma by
Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate, and you can stream it. He just asked for a donation. It's very powerful, just on what really trauma looks like, and from there, hopefully, that we can really get to the root of what's next. So,
definition of grief, as you can see on the screen, to summarize it, is the emotional and physical reaction to the loss of someone or something. The mirror to that is the trauma, and it is also the emotional response, but it's to the event, like an accident, a rape, COVID, a disaster, and immediately after the event, we often experience denial, similar to grief. We often experience anger and all types of emotions.
Okay. If you don't believe one can change, ask the person to share their recovery or their life story. So the slide here says, one must reconcile grief and trauma events. Reconciliation doesn't just happen. It's a process or a journey. It emerges a lot like grass grows, and this is a quote from Alan Wolfields in the Center for Lost Work. We don't usually water our lawns daily to see if the grass is growing, but the grass does grow, and soon we know we need to cut it. One doesn't look at itself each day to gauge healing, but we find a new wholeness.
So what are the reactions to both grief and trauma? They often are similar, but they often are a little bit different. In trauma, people are preoccupied with the event. With grief, they're preoccupied with the thing that they've lost or the person that they lost. In trauma, people are often preoccupied with the event itself and have reactions to it, which include flashbacks, images of the scene playing out again and again. In grief, the preoccupation is the loss of the person. They won't be here today. They won't be here tomorrow. The loss of a thing. For children, for example, the loss of their home or the loss of their family pet or the the loss of their blanket that they had the night they got removed by CPS. In grief, guilt says, I wish I would, or I would have. And trauma, guilt says, it's my fault. So there's a lot of self-blame and a lot of picking on the self. In grief, anger is non-destructive, neither towards oneself nor others. It's often the tantrum, throwing of items, right? Or the, I'm just pissed that they're not here today. Within trauma, the anger is often violent and often turned towards someone or towards themselves. And so to mirror off of the previous presenters, think about suicide.
Yeah, and so many things come in circles, as we're here today talking about the circle of life and meaning. You may heard the saying, "Come full circle." Um, we know that grief is internal, and if we help people turn their grief into mourning, we can put the mourning into the external so the healing can start. It's called putting grief into action, coming full circle. And I think it's only fitting as we enter the world as infants looking for connection, as we talked about in the very first beginning, the first, was it 1,000 days? How important that is. So I think that if you can go from birth to death and recognize the trauma and the grief work that needs to be done, mourning becomes to healing. So we have some symptoms of both that we're going to talk about. They sound pretty similar. We've talked about a lot of them today already. So
often, not only after a traumatic experience, but within grief, people often have trouble falling or staying asleep. Exhaustion, I think it's been mentioned a few times today. We're all exhausted from the last 2 years of witnessing people's experiences and being a part of a collective trauma. Feeling sad, depressed, moody, irritable, or hyperactive. This often shows up as a different disorder. So sometimes little kids that have experienced a loss or experienced trauma, they're hyperactive, or they're more irritable or more angry. Often in adults, you see the same thing where they lose track of thought, like I just did. They're often more moody or irritable. They react quicker at work to their responses. Feeling numb, having trouble eating or overeating, having trouble focusing, avoiding social contacts and usual routines. We've seen a lot in the last 2 years of people withdrawing and seeking out social media instead of human beings, misusing alcohol and other drugs.
Okay, and this is definitely the work we do. It doesn't make a lot of sense at times. Many deep changes happen in states of chaos and crisis. Would everyone agree? Everyone experience that as caretakers? But one thing that is constant is hope is the expectation in all of them. So if we can sit with somebody, offer them hope, treat the whole person with trauma-informed information and care, deep changes happen. Again, that coming full circle. Next slide, I think. So this is kind of just some stages of grief, and grief can be for death and for trauma and for just anything that's a loss. I have an elder parent. He lost his social life during COVID for 2 years. He didn't go to the grocery store. He didn't meet with friends. That was a loss. We had to come up with really creative ways of trying to get him some social interaction. To the point I would do his grocery shopping in the Safeway, but I would have him meet me to pick the groceries up and haul them in the house so he would get some activity and some exercise and just the reason to get his truck out of the garage. So there's the road that you take. Does any of that look familiar? Sometimes that's what it feels like, because we know there's the thing called secondary trauma, compassion fatigue. That's another topic or another trauma.
So earlier, I think I had heard within the conference today, um, what are some simple things that we can do for mental illness, for experiencing of suicide, experiencing trauma, and SAMHSA actually gives us 4 hours of trauma-informed care, and you can actually find this on the SAMHSA website. And so, realization: how can trauma affect families, group, organizations, and communities, as well as individuals? So how does it affect all of us? A few moments ago, somebody had mentioned the intergenerational um, losses and grief within Montana, especially here in Butte and Anaconda. Often you talk with our clients and you hear about my mom went through this, my grandma went through this, and just realizing that it can affect families over generations, it can affect communities over generations, and just realizing that it does exist. With that, so does grief, the loss of what we could have had. Recognizing the signs of trauma. So throughout today, we've talked about what are the signs of trauma, people that are disconnecting, children that are acting out, adults that are suddenly up and leaving a situation that they normally wouldn't, not dressing, hygiene, all of those things are recognizing some of the signs of a traumatic event. Responding by applying the principles of a trauma-informed approach. I like to call trauma-informed care actually trauma-engaged care, because you actually have to engage with other human beings, and you actually have to experience and listen and spend time within that hole that we started out with, the little dragon. Resist re-traumatization of clients, staff members, family members, and others. So one of the things that often happens is we keep making them tell the story directly over and over and over again. What happened to you? What happened to you? Instead of sitting there and asking them to direct us where they need to go. What do you need right now? How can I provide something? I'm just going to sit here with you until we can figure out what you do need.
Okay, healing. Um, this is not an inclusive list. We can add so much more, but stay present with the feelings. The person that's going through the healing, they're the expert in their life. Listen to their story. Plan for trigger and special days. That's huge. If you know that there's something coming up, reduce isolation. Be gentle with the process, including being gentle with yourself as the caregiver, as the person on the treatment team. Allow the story to be told without answers. We will never figure out the why of some things. Time. This one I feel is super important, and I know that I've seen this done really good in the Butte area, but when words are absent, use movement, rituals, or ceremony. So there's a reason when we have a death that we go through the process of the wake, all those different things. And when words are absent, we use ceremony. In the historical traumas, there's also historical rituals that are super powerful. So seek outside help and support, and just hope is always the universal. So
sometimes you do have to redo the ceremonies, redo the rituals.
And they say for proper healing, and I'm not, this is the Center for Losses recommended, but you need healing in 3 ceremonies. And so that can get tricky, because I've seen, especially with a town who've had a lot of suicide, is hurry up and get the services done, and hurry up, and we don't want to have copycats, and we do, and really that is a service that we need to honor. I was able to attend a service a couple weeks ago, and it was done just perfect for the person, and there was some children and some grandchildren involved, and I thought, what a great process for them to be able to have to honor this person later on. Mourning is very, very complex, back to the all this stuff that we're doing, but okay.
Going back to just a traumatic response, the body feels the pain, the body tells the score, holds the score of all of the events that have occurred, preparing for long-term effects. So trauma, grief, and loss, this is a lifelong healing process. And so knowing that today you're great, today is a perfect experience, no big deal this year, next year you're angry, the year after that you might be crying and drunk in a bar. It's just knowing that is lifelong and that experiences compound and connect to all of our new experiences. So you could experience something, and I'm going to pick on COVID because we're all experiencing it currently. You could experience something like that, and then you could hear a news flash 10 years from now that the country is locking down and have a visceral response to, oh my God, I'm not going to see my friends anymore. You could have a emotional response at dinner one night because you heard that there's a new version of a type of disease coming out. So just knowing that is lifelong. There's no 12-week cure to grief. You can't go to the ceremony and throw it away, right? It follows you. It becomes a part of you. But ultimately, you can heal and become a new version of you.
I would, yeah.
So the depth of the loss is the connection that was present. Connection is so important. We talked about it a lot. I think in every recovery model and every healing story, there's some kind of connection. And when you ask people to tell their stories or you sit with them in silence, and when they get the words or it could be drawing, writing, it doesn't have to always be words, that the connection is really what helps and heals. Dr. Irons is with the little teenager from Anaconda. I love teens. They're my passion. I worked with them for many, many years. They want to be heard. They don't want to be judged. They don't want to be told. All that stuff has happened and it doesn't work. So just sitting in the moment.
I think the other piece I would add to connection is you may know somebody and be close friends with them, and you may experience a mild reaction to, let's say, their death. But then you may have a grandparent that you were super close to and you spent most of your life with, and it's a devastating loss. That is the connection that leads to the need for deeper healing and longer-term healing. Another thing that I would add is with grief of human beings or grief of something that has a name, make sure that you as a provider are willing to say the name and connect with the person over the person they lost. One of the things we do, because we want to protect other people's feelings, is we don't want to say the name. And so that's really important as honoring the connection that people have.
And that can include not just people, could be pets. There's been some really trauma events around the need for, the childhood animal, or, even the little bearded dragon we got. Those are connections that help in those, and to somehow have a ceremony or to honor.
So bringing it all together. The only cure to grief is to grieve. It's to experience it, to sit in it, and to live with it.
And it's a lifelong process. So here's the resources, and then again, I would encourage everybody here to watch the Wisdom of Trauma, because I do think it's powerful. I hope we could do a screening or something and that everybody has come today after two long years. It's just empowering. So thank you, and keep up the good work. Do you guys have any questions?